Hi guys, welcome back to the Newcastle United training ground. Eddie Howe has this morning had his news conference ahead of tomorrow's trip to Manchester City. Still buoyant, I think, as a squad following that 5-1 thumping of Aston Villa last weekend. And I'm here as well because Lewis Hall will be arriving for his medical today. That is after Newcastle agreed a deal with Chelsea to see the teenager sign for Newcastle. It's a loan, an initial season-long loan with an obligation to make the deal permanent next summer. At that point, Newcastle will pay £28 million to sign him permanently, with a potential £7 million in performance-related add-ons. So what that means is Newcastle have got Hall, or will be getting Hall, on a loan until the end of the season. Only then will they begin to pay up the £28 million agreement with Chelsea. And after that, the additional £7 million will be if Hall reaches certain targets, if he reaches a certain amount of appearances or wins certain trophies with Newcastle over the length of his contract. So it's probably more likely that it's £28 million Newcastle spend, but if he does phenomenally well during his time here and Newcastle do phenomenally well as a team, then there will be an additional £7 million on top of that. So Newcastle struck the deal for Hall this morning. He's currently on his way to the training ground right now, where he will begin his two-part medical, and then Newcastle will hope they can conclude the deal over the weekend. As Eddie Howe said at his news conference this morning, that will complete their transfer business this summer. They already had 3 players in the door in the shape of Sandro Tonali, Harvey Barnes and Tino Livramento for around £125 million. Hall's arrival will take it to just over £150 million this window, of course offset slightly by the departure of Alan St-Maximin. So I make that a net spend this window of around £125 million by Newcastle United on new signings. Howe also said this morning at his news conference that this will complete Newcastle's transfer business should they get it done, and the only way that will change is if there are injuries to his current squad. So obviously if the likes of Tonali or Bruno were to get injured, that might change things. They might need to dip into the loan market, but should everyone stay fairly fit, then the arrival of Lewis Hall this weekend will complete their transfer business. So he'll be delighted. He's got all 4 signings in with 2 weeks of the window to spare, meaning he's not frantically trying to sign players in the last couple of windows. Might make it a little bit less interesting for me in transfer deadline day. Maybe I need to take a couple of days off, but there we are. That's obviously the way Newcastle are doing things these days, rather than waiting until the last minute, which we have seen from time to time in the past. Not so much under Mike Ashley, but certainly in certain times they've been sort of frantically scrabbling around last minute. That's not going to be the case in this transfer window, of course, unless there is an injury to one of his top stars. So a fairly interesting press conference this morning. I'll talk about a few of the issues and the questions that were raised a little bit more, should I say, later on. But firstly, let's see Lewis Hall arriving for that medical. So those were the pictures of Lewis Hall arriving for that Newcastle United medical. I would suggest it's more likely to be announced tomorrow. Normally it takes best part of 24 hours for the whole process to go through, so we'll see. It could be later tonight. It's been quite quick this morning with his journey up here. He flew in by private jet at lunchtime from Farnborough. and then obviously underwent his medical, or is beginning to undergo his medical here at the Newcastle United training ground. He'll get shown around as well. Interestingly, he's not just with his agent, he's got his parents with him. His mum flew up with him this morning. I believe his dad drove up with his car from London this morning. So poor Colin Hall getting the short straw there and having to drive Lewis's car up while he flew up in the private jet alongside his agent and his mum and other people close to him. But yeah, there he is, undergoing his medical today. As I said earlier, it's a £28 million loan move, so Newcastle will pay that £28 million at a later date, probably next summer, perhaps even in instalments afterwards. And Newcastle, of course, are obliged to make it permanent. They're essentially just postponing the payment to a later stage, so that, as I say, so they can comply with FFP regulations. So yeah, and Eddie Howe delighted to have got his fourth player in, and amazingly, as I said earlier, he's done it with 2 weeks of the window to spare. One thing I want to correct myself on: I said earlier, it being a net spend of 125 is actually a net spend of 100, because if you actually think about the Hall payment, it's not coming out of this summer's money, it's going to be next year and the year after. So because they've deferred that, they're taking out a future budget. Essentially, Newcastle have spent round about £125 million this window, discounting Hall, and they've brought in around £25 million for Alan St-Maximin. So yeah, so a net spend of round about £100 million for Newcastle. In terms of the press conference today, a couple of interesting things. We had a bit of a laughing joke about Sandro Tonali going to Wetherspoons the other day. I asked if it was Matt Ritchie, who I thought it would be. A lot of people think it was Jacob Murphy that booked the table, but I got the impression from the way Eddie Howe was speaking that it was a bit of an innocent experience for Sandro Tonali. It sounds as though he's booked the table himself, something like that. Anyway, we'll never know, but it was quite an interesting little exchange at the news conference this morning. Also, he was very good on Alex Isak, saying that, £63 million was a lot of money. It was a heavy fee, people would have thought back then, last summer, but now already, with the way he's playing, the goals he's scoring and the way he's leading the line, you look at that with the fees that are being banded around this summer, and it actually looks like really good business. So it was quite good to hear him on that. And also on Jurgen Klopp, I asked him about Jurgen Klopp's comments last week, where he said only Newcastle will be bothered by the new technical area rules. I thought Eddie might want to sort of have his say back, but he was as classy as ever, wasn't he, and said, look, I agree with him. It does bother us, like it's something that we like to be stood there next to each other, and we are affected by it. But he said, look, I actually thought we dealt with it quite well last week, acted and worked in tandem well with one another, and we'll just have to work with it moving forward. So yeah, he stayed clear of getting involved in any war awards with Jurgen Klopp, and also said he understood where Pep's coming from. The fact Pep's complaining they've got a match on Saturday, having played the Super Cup on Wednesday night. Pep felt it could have been put off to Sunday or Monday, and Eddie said, look, I understand where he's coming from, I understand it, and I feel for him, but we don't pick the fixtures, so we just go there and try and win. So I got the feeling that they're in as good a place as they can be going to Manchester City this weekend. Going on the back of that 5-1 win against Villa last weekend, when Newcastle were sublime, really. Players all scoring, Barnes, Wilson, Isak, all on the target. Of course, Tonali as well. They're going there full of confidence, and they play a Manchester City side who have got injuries themselves. It's still early in the season, and they played that Super Cup on Wednesday night. So actually, I think it's a good time to go there. I think Eddie Howe thinks that as well. You would not be surprised if you see Newcastle go there and get something tomorrow. They have never won at the Etihad, I'm reliably informed. They've never gone there and won, so this could be the very first time that they're to do that. But I think, listen, if Newcastle were to pick up a point, Eddie Howe and everyone involved at the club would be really pleased with that. So I think it says everything about how far Newcastle have come that they're going there looking to try and win the game. Of course, in previous years, they would go there and park the bus and shut up shop and try and keep the score down, but that's not the case under the new regime here, and with the signings in, the players playing well and desperate for the next game to come around, you would not be surprised if Newcastle went there and got something tomorrow. So let's see what it brings. Lots going on today. News comments this morning. As I say, Lewis Hall undergoing his medical today. We'll expect an announcement on that later on, after Newcastle agreed that £28 million plus £7 million in add-ons fee with Chelsea for the left back, with the money, as I say, being deferred to a later stage. Okay guys, if you like what you see, please subscribe, give me a comment or a thumbs up below, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers for now.